And we're back with the show. Once again, it's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here. Well, this weekend comes another big date for pro wrestling. It is the annual SummerSlam presented to you by the World Wrestling Entertainment, better known as the WWE. You can catch it today or actually catch it this weekend. Well, you can catch the replay if you're listening to this after this weekend, but you can catch it on the beloved WWE network at for a very low price of $10 a month. Now, I will say this, it is one of the most beloved, I guess, shows each and every year annually that they do. It is something that is now a time-honored tradition for many, many years now. And who better to break down this year's card than someone who has appeared on the podcast before and was very, very appreciated by us for coming back on so quickly in such short notice. He is one of the hosts of We Podcast and We Know Things. You can catch their awesome show today on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a gazillion other outlets. It is my good friend, Mr. Greg Hall, and also ESO Network now as well.
Yeah, ESO Network, Greg Hall. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Shout out to Mike and Mike at the ESO Network for helping us out get on the network.
Exactly. I think I like your show, like my show. I think I need just like a laundry list of all the different radio stations and also podcast networks and podcast affiliates and podcast outlets and software apps that you can actually get our shows. So it's incredible that the amount of access that both of our shows get each and every week.
Yeah, it's up over 30 now for us, so we're excited.
Oh my gosh, same here as well. I lost track and I lost count once I hit in the mid-20s. So it's incredible indeed. But it is, again, We Podcast and We Know Things. You got to catch their show today, covering everything on pop culture. It's truly, truly an incredible listen each and every time out. But we are here to talk a truly special event every year. I consider it one of the big four. I'm sure most people do as well. It's one of the big four pay-per-views. See, I'm still using that word, pay-per-views.
I'm always going to use it. I'm always going to use pay-per-view.
Well, they still technically do.
Yeah.
It's still technically a pay-per-view for the WWE. It's going to be taking place this year. It's going to be taking place as so many other WWE outlets have been taking place in the New York City area. They really have affinity for that. And as far as someone like myself who really appreciates everything that goes on in the WWE, they're considered New York they're not considered New York for nothing. So, they do a lot of stuff over there, and they even though they are worldwide, they always seem to have affinity for running a lot of big shows in the New York market. But
it was the birthplace of Raw. It was the birthplace of it hosted so many WrestleManias and Royal Rumbles, and I mean, New York is the hotbed for the area. I know that when the territory days were hot, the Northeast and more specifically New York was where the McMahons kind of planted their flag. So it's almost written in the sand that almost every year SummerSlam is back in New York, and this will be the fourth straight year it's in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center. So we're looking forward to it. It's only a stone's throw away from where I'm sitting right now.
Exactly. And with WrestleMania next year taking place in the New York area, it just reminds me of how many wrestlers back in the 80s and 90s referred to the WWE as saying, hey, I'm going to take my talents to New York,
right,
if they're working in any other the independent or regional outlets. So it all comes to fruition as far as, like you said, at the Barclays Center this weekend. And it all starts with the headlining match. Universal Championship is on the line with Brock Lesnar defending against Roman Reigns. The Women's Championship is Alexa Bliss against Ronda Rousey. AJ Styles defends the SmackDown WWE Championship against Samoa Joe. Daniel Bryan versus The Miz in a long-running feud, which I'm sure will continue well after, but we won't go there on that one just yet, mind you.
Yeah, right.
The SmackDown Women's Championship is Carmella defending against Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. The Intercontinental Championship with Dolph Ziggler defending against Seth Rollins. Shinsuke Nakamura defends the U.S. Championship against Jeff Hardy. Braun Strowman versus Kevin Owens. Finn Balor versus Baron Corbin. The SmackDown Tag Team Championships are on the line with the Bludgeon Brothers against the New Day. Cruiserweight Championship, Cedric Alexander against Drew Gulak. Rusev and Lana versus Andre Cien Almas and Zelina Vega in a mixed tag match. And the Raw Tag Team Championships are on the line with the B team defending against the Revival. Are you all set for another 8 hours of pro wrestling watching, my friend? Because these days, that's what it is when you watch it on the WWE Network.
Yeah, we have the 2-hour pre-show that'll involve a couple matches. We've a baker's dozen on the card, 13 in total as you rounded all of them down. And it's crazy because the 13 matches for SummerSlam might not be as good as the 5 that are going to be for TakeOver. That's my shameless NXT TakeOver plug. It's the best shows of the year, the TakeOver shows. But for some reason, I just have I have a love-hate relationship with this card. I either love the match and can't wait, or I just don't care. There's no match that really just sits in the middle for me. So I'm excited to dive into it very much so.
And I think the match that the hardcore wrestling fans pretty much want to see is, no, I'm sorry, it's not Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns again.
Yeah,
it is actually The Miz versus Daniel Bryan because of the behind-the-scenes, actual real animosity the duo have held towards each other over the course of the past 10, almost 15 years now. So I ask you, Greg, your thoughts on this match first and foremost, because like I said, this is going to be something that kind of blurs the lines. Now, they're going to be professional when they go out there, but behind the scenes, you and I both know that there's always something going on between those two, whether they're taking shots at each other, both in public and off stage as well.
What I like about what The Miz and Daniel Bryan have done throughout this feud, they did a nice job last night on SmackDown, kind of recapping it over the last 8 to 10 years, all the animosity that's kind of built up. You don't know if it's a work or if it's a shoot promo whenever they go at each other. And you have to think it's just a little bit of both. Like even with Roman Reigns and Lesnar, you can tell Roman's a little serious when he's saying what he's saying. So I like that they're bringing that reality aspect into this feud. What I don't like about this match is, to me, even though we've had 8 years, 10 years of buildup, it still feels a little rushed because when Daniel Bryan came back, they put him right up against Big Cass. He had 2 underwhelming matches. Then they put him up with Team Hell No for 2 weeks to kind of transition into this whole Miz thing. And this Miz thing's been going on less than a month. And what as an organization, what you kind of got to realize is there are fans that don't remember 8-10 years ago. There are fans that don't remember 2 years ago when he shot on him on Talking Smack that made Daniel Bryan walk off the set. There are people that didn't watch then or that were casual viewers. So a video package 5 days before SummerSlam might not be enough to hype it up. But from a pure wrestling match standpoint, this has all the potential in the world to be match of the night.
I agree with you on that because The Miz has improved considerably inside the ring over the past few years from where he was, and now is catching up almost to his on-mic persona, his charisma, and everything else that he brings to the table to make him a better, well-rounded performer. I agree with you on that. And with Daniel Bryan leading the way as one of the all-time greatest as far as in the past, I guess, well, actually this century, you could probably put him in your top 10 as far as the century is concerned. Definitely is going to make for, I think, a match of the night as well. But like I inferred earlier, I think this is just the kickoff, and you're going to be seeing grudge match after grudge match with these two. Hopefully not ad nauseum, but hopefully leading to something down the road. Maybe at WrestleMania, like a cage match per se, where it will be a final blow-off match for both.
Yeah, and I was talking to somebody else who had said that, well, Daniel Bryan's on kind of borrowed time here because of his injury history. My counter to that was everybody is. I mean, everybody's one head injury away from becoming the next Daniel Bryan. So I don't know if WWE is being cautious, and that's why we're getting a match between these two so soon. I would have loved to see maybe a little bit more build, but I get it. SummerSlam is the place to kind of boost this into the stratosphere, if you will. I'm thinking it's going to be taken to the Rumble. I can totally see one of them carrying a belt into the Rumble because Miz and Mrs. just got renewed for season 2 already. So the Miz is, like you said, his in-ring work catching up to his persona, the A-lister as he's referred to. He is one of the best heels, if not the best heel in the company. He's a 7 or 8 time Intercontinental champion. Shinsuke being the United States champion, I can see maybe Daniel going for that onto the side after he's done with Hardy, picking up the U.S. title, and now they have something to feud over, going into the Rumble. So I can see something like that. But to me, I'm with you 100%. This is a long feud that's going to take us through to 2019.
I agree with you on that, and maybe even up to SummerSlam this time next year. But I think there will be some major cage blow off or some type of real on the line battle where the hatred and the animosity those two have for each other will finally come to a head at some point in time, whether it's true real life still or not. But I think there's still a little bit of animosity behind the scenes with those two. At least they give the impression that that's the case, and the way they needle each other is on social media and on television still alludes to the fact that maybe this kind of bleeds over into a real life scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some other great matches and some not so great matches that you indicated that I clearly see as well. It's just kind of the way that's been going for the WWE for quite some time now, where there's some feast or famine when it comes to their cards are concerned. Which matches are you targeting? Which should fans look out for, and which matches do you really think are gonna actually entertain audiences and not just have them go for the refrigerator?
So the reason I think that the takeovers are so impactful is because they're 2 hours, maybe 220. There's like 5 matches tops, and they all have implication. A 13 match card with 2 or 3 on a 2-hour pre-show, it just doesn't connect for me. The matches I'm not necessarily looking forward to that much. Finn Balor and Baron Corbin has been a completely forgettable feud outside of a dollhouse. That was the only gag I got out of it. I think Andrade Cien Almas and Rusev both deserve better than the pre-show. I wish that they were on the main card, but okay, fine. The pre-show's on Facebook, so technically it actually can get more viewers than the network, so I can see the upside of being on the pre-show. We talked about Miz and Daniel Bryan. I would say the Cruiserweight Championship match is something to stay far away from. It's just forgettable to me. I like Drew Gulak as a fellow Philadelphian. I appreciate him, and I want him to pick up the W, but do you watch 205 Live?
Occasionally, but as someone who thinks of fondly the Cruiserweight division in WCW in the mid-90s, it is just so hard to watch the 205 these days because of the fact that the talent there does not have anything really to show or to present to customers, to present to the audience out there that really is entertaining or interesting. I'm a big fan of Ricochet. I love him. Yeah. I think he's one of the best talents in the WWE. Why he's still in NXT, I still don't know. Don't give me this. They have to learn. AJ Styles didn't have to learn a thing. He popped out on WWE right away. Don't give me this proving ground or anything of that nature to learn the quote unquote WWE style. He's worked around the world for so long now that he would be a star anywhere you go. And I think he being on the NXT card, yes, he's going to be wrestling for a title on the NXT card. That's great. But I really think he is being underserved in the WWE at this point in time. And could he be the key to livening up the 205? I think he could be, but the way they utilize individuals there that have any kind of promise leads me to more of a pessimistic attitude. And I apologize for that up in front. But I'm a big fan of Ricochet. I'm excited to see him at NXT TakeOver. And I think down the line, they're going to have to do something to reformat the 205 Live concept to make it more enjoyable. Because if you'd have told me back, like I said, in the WCW days in mid-90s that they would have their own show, I would have been really excited for it. These days, not so much in the way it's being presented at this point in time.
Well, let's think about it this way. 205 Live, it's an hour. It's after SmackDown. It's actually competing up against Miz and Mrs. right now. They're out on at 10 o'clock each, same time slot. It's that new exciting show versus I'll catch it on demand later for 205 Live. NXT is so overstocked with talent that you could bring up effectively Ciampa, Gargano, Ricochet, and Dream and put them all in 205 Live, give it a complete breath of fresh air. There's your new kind of flagship network show. Then you have NXT UK coming next year, or maybe even later this year, I forget. So now you have 3 different network shows, all with incredible talent from all over the world. And then you have your 2 main brands. It's 5 shows. It could literally take you every single week. 205 Live could stand to air on Thursdays. So now we have wrestling 4 nights a week. I think that could help but I'm with you. Ricochet is one of the best talents I've ever seen. It's hard for me to pick a winner for him versus Adam Cole because they're both just so incredible. That's why I'm happy we're not doing predictions for TakeOver because we'd be here for hours. But the Cruiserweight match on SummerSlam just doesn't do it for me. I will say that last match, though, the Bludgeon Brothers and New Day don't do it for me either. But the last match that I don't think is going to be worth our time and investment, ROI, return on investment, would be Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. I think personally, Brock Lesnar is the worst thing that ever happened to the WWE. He is the reason I stopped watching it in 2003 for 10 years. Came back in 2013, have been a fan since, but I had 10 years there where I didn't watch specifically because I didn't want to look at Brock Lesnar. And I don't want to look at him now. He's a boring no-show part-time champion, and he's going against somebody that WWE's been pushing down our throats for 4 years. I just don't see the appeal in that match.
I don't either, and whether or not he goes to UFC, it doesn't really matter to me at this point in time because I don't think at his age he would actually fare well in the UFC, especially against someone like John Jones, where I think he would probably just, he would get badly hurt with John Jones at this point in time. That's just my opinion on that from my understanding of the MMA at this point in time and what I've seen and observed. But seeing him in the WWE, it just really, he's the only one really at this point in time with star power because their leveling of the playing field and the way they go ahead and position their wrestlers at this point in time is a cause and effect, I believe it. And there are individuals out there with promise like Braun Strowman, Shinsuke Nakamura. I mean, there's about 3 or 4 others, Finn Balor, that all had signs that they could have broken out and become a major player in the industry. But the cause and effect of, well, you got to win one, you got to lose one, you got to win one, you got to lose one, has caused a lot of situations where you do not have that star individual for a pro wrestler that's out there that WWE can market and market boldly like they have with The Rock, Steve Austin, etc. Even John Cena to an extent as well. So we've got an issue there. I will say this about Gargano and Ciampa. I think both are just truly exceptional wrestlers, but going back to NXT real quick before we head on with a little bit more comments on SummerSlam, do you think they are a victim of their own success in NXT because their matches have been truly brilliant and outstanding?
I would say that it's difficult. They put themselves on a pedestal like every takeover, and every takeover it's got to one up the last one. Is it the best one ever? Is it the best one ever? I was lucky enough to see NXT TakeOver Philadelphia in January. I was lucky enough to go to the Rumble, and 10 times out of 10, I rewatched TakeOver. And 10 times out of 10, when I think about that weekend down in downtown Philadelphia with my friends, my wife, my buddy from Boston came down to spend the weekend. I think about our time at TakeOver, giving people 2 sweets in the hallways and yelling "Baby" every 30 seconds. It was a great time, and NXT deserves more eyes on it because every 3 months when there's a big pay-per-view, that's when they fill the big arena for TakeOver. They deserve more eyes on it, but I almost think that because it's like it's such a limited product, you get a big pay-per-view once a quarter, not once a month, shoved down your throat. Extreme Rules, Backlash, da-da-da-da-da-da, Money in the Bank, all these things, you get TakeOver, and that's it. There's no other name for any of their pay-per-views besides TakeOver, and then The City or War Games. And That's what we get with NXT. We get pure wrestling. We get good character work. We get great promos. We get great feuds. We don't get them shoved down our throat. We get them once a week on Wednesdays and then every quarter for a pay-per-view. I think that's perfect. I understand the WWE's business model of doing pay-per-views every month, but it rushes feuds and it also sets up the wrong feud. If you let feuds be able to gestate and if you let them, just breathe a little bit, you see what happens with TakeOver. There's never a dull pay-per-view, and there's barely ever a bad match. I don't remember the last stinker on a TakeOver. So I think NXT has positioned itself brilliantly for now and in the future, especially as we see the TV deal coming up and what's going to happen with WWE next year and in the future. It's looking bright for the NXT brand.
It is indeed, and I don't think you will see many bad matches over the course of a year in NXT because of the fact that they've all got something to prove, and they all wanted to get to the big roster. But I think Gargano and Ciampa have had such success with their matches that I think WWE has been unwilling to pull the trigger on them coming up to the big roster because they're making such a name for themselves in NXT at this point in time. It's very hard for the WWE to say, hey, okay, we're going to bring you up and just be a mid-carder or be someone that's going to go ahead and make a small to minimal impact because of being buried in our big roster. So why don't we just keep you down there and continue this great feud that you're having in NXT? I hope that when they both come up to the WWE that they're going to be given a large enough role because they certainly deserve it. And what they've done for NXT and the NXT brand after a small period of time where it was in limbo after some call-ups kind of actually took a lot out of the depth out of the NXT roster just a short time ago. They've like you said, they've really made the NXT something special, and I'm looking forward to them coming up and making a difference and not being put in a certain position going forward. So I will see. I am glad to see this play out, this feud play out, but I think it's hurt them a little bit in the guys that they could have been called up already to the big roster, but haven't because their feud has been so good and so watchable on NXT television.
The last thing that I'll kind of say about NXT and specifically with Gargano and Ciampa and just the brand in general is the WWE hadn't had a 5-star match, according to Bill Meltzer, a 5-star match in 7 years. In 2018 alone, they've had 3. 2 of them, including the first one, which was from TakeOver, have featured Johnny Gargano and were on NXT. So 66% of the WWE's 5-star matches over the last 7 years have been from the NXT brand, both of them with Gargano, which is where I agree with you that if Johnny Gargano gets called up and just gets buried in a mid-card somewhere like Finn Balor, I'm going to lose my stuff. So completely agree. I'd rather have him be at a high-profile feud in NXT than get buried at a mid-card because he is so good in that ring that I want to watch him at the peak of his game, not in a squash match or once every 2 months on TV against Ty Dillinger.
I don't blame you a bit. I just, like I said, like we both said, and are intimating that there's some great talent with NXT, but we're kind of fearful when they go up to the big roster. But we know it's best for their long interest and obviously for their families as well. Actually, a couple last things I got for you while we're previewing WWE SummerSlam. Once again, I have Greg Hall on with us. He's from the great podcast known as We Podcast and We Know Things. It's available today, right now, with many episodes ready for you to listen to on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 major outlets. I want to ask you real quick your thoughts on 2 of the remaining matches, which I think do have an interest or should have an interest. First off is Braun Strowman versus Kevin Owens, which is mired down on the lower end of the card, even though these 2 individuals, for vastly different reasons, I believe should be better thought of and put in a higher place on the card at this point in time.
I love that this is the match you're going for, because this is my most anticipated match of the entire evening, because these are 2 of my top 5 in the company main roster, not including NXT. These are 2 of my top 5. You said it a minute ago where the WWE is always looking for the next Rock, the next Stone Cold. For marketability or in-ring talent, these guys are it from a character standpoint. Braun Strowman is the best thing that happened to this company in years. Kevin Owens is one of the best characters and one of the most believable heels, and you just love to hate him, but you respect him so much that they can't do any wrong. And now you add a stipulation to this match, like if Braun Strowman gets counted out or disqualified or loses in any fashion, that he's going to lose his Money in the Bank contract. We finally have a reason for these two to go at it. It's not just a cage match. It's not just, a singles match. There's ramifications on the line. That's making me excited for this match because these two are going to go all out. You're going to see Kevin Owens try the dastardly stuff because Braun Strowman is twice his size. You're going to see Braun throw him around like a rag doll. I'm looking so forward to it because Kevin Owens' facial expressions and Braun's so over with the crowd. He's just going to put his two arms up and scream, and everybody's going to go absolutely nuts with Get These Hands. I can't wait. These two are money, and the WWE has their future in these two. I'd love to see them invest. You said it also. Vince McMahon has his prototypical champion, the Bobby Lashley's, the John Cena's, the Roman Reigns, the Brock Lesnar's. It's the big kind of jacked, burly guys with a little bit of personality and not much mic skill. That's like the new guy in WWE. I would love them to go back to the character-based stuff because Strowman and Kevin Owens just kick butt.
I agree with you on that, and I think that they're well underserved at this point in time within the WWE, and that's the match that should have been for this Universal Championship. Although, for me, it just comes to the fact that there should be only one World Championship, and they should have merged it and not separated to a show-specific championship. But that's another story and another day. So another podcast entirely for me to moan and groan about that. But speaking of the championships for these shows, different shows that they have, the only other match that I think is worth shouting out, and the only other match that I think is worth previewing, should be a very solid match with two individuals that have gone head-to-head before many times when they were both independent wrestlers. And that is AJ Styles and Samoa Joe. And if Samoa Joe is healthy, I think he can really do great things with AJ Styles. I think they can map out a great match if they're allowed to within the WWE confines. And I think that if they're given anywhere near the time limit as well, that they will create a match similar to what they've done before in independent shows from 10, 15 years ago. And I think they can actually revert back to that and actually bring that back as far as that type of style and skill that they are both known for before they actually entered the WWE. Your thoughts on this match as a final match we're going to look at in our preview of WWE SummerSlam?
I would love to, think back 10 years when these two were feuding over the X Division title in Impact or TNA, whatever you want to call it. And never in a million years would I dream that both of these guys would have been in the WWE ring, much less against each other. I am looking forward to this match. I would say selfishly, I'm probably looking forward to both women's matches more than this, but I do love both of these guys so much. Samoa Joe, to me, is going to go over here in a logical standpoint, but I just can't see AJ losing it. Like, as much as I want to pick Joe, I'm going to go with AJ Styles on this one because of a couple reasons. Number one, Samoa Joe kind of stood tall on SmackDown the other night where he read a letter from AJ's wife and blah, blah, blah. And whoever stands tall at the go-home show is probably going to lose, number one. Number two, AJ is on the cover of WWE 2K19. That game doesn't drop until October. He's the cover athlete, so how are you going to put the strap on this guy, announce him as the cover athlete, and then take the strap away before the game comes out when he's probably going to have the belt in the picture? So I don't know if they're going to do that. Heck, they could, and he could just win it back. I don't know. But what logically I can't see happening is AJ Styles beating him with a Styles Clash or a phenomenal forearm. That's not enough to keep Joe down. So I wonder how AJ could possibly win this match, but I think somehow he's going to.
I agree with you on that, even though I would love to see Samoa Joe as a champion in the WWE because you and I both know, because for many reasons he was for a long time never thought of being a major player in the WWE, let alone being in the WWE, let alone even possibly winning a championship in the WWE. And now look, after all these years in TNA and Independence and ROH, Ring of Honor, that he's now has the opportunity to go ahead and match up against AJ Styles, someone who has gone down the same paths that he has taken and looks to become a WWE champion. And I hope that at some point in time he does, because it is well deserved.
Did you see him as NXT champion a couple of years ago when he first got with the company?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He was incredible. He was incredible against Finn Balor. He had incredible matches against Shinsuke. And this guy has the world is his oyster. He has no ceiling. That's how good he is. And I would love it, if you put the title on him. I would think, though, Roman's a face, but let's be real, he's not really. Nobody loves Roman. I don't know if you're gonna have two heel champions as your brand, kind of representing both brands. So I don't know. Maybe they keep the strap on AJ just purely because he's a way over babyface that the crowd absolutely adores.
Well, I was kind of disappointed with the matches between Shinsuke Nakamura and AJ Styles.
Yep.
Because of the fact that they had such a tremendous series of matches in New Japan, and they were not able to translate it here for whatever reason. And Shinsuke Nakamura was not given the championship. And I was kind of disappointed in that decision, because AJ Styles is good enough to get it back, and he's a great enough talent, and I appreciate his work ethic. But if they're not going to give it to Shinsuke, I don't think they're going to give it to Samoa Joe at this point in time. But you mentioned, before we head on out on that end, but you mentioned the women's championship matches that you're excited about. With me, it just comes down to this. Ronda Rousey is going to be the future for the WWE. Is it coming up this Sunday? I think it's a little too soon. For me, if I was planning or booking the actual matches and whatnot, I would have waited and given a point in time where I think it would have led to the undefeated streak matching up with Ronda Rousey versus Asuka. But they ruined that. They ruined that big time, and they really devalued her character and the myth and the excitement that people had for her. They blew that one away, and they blew it big time.
Yeah.
And with Shayna Baszler actually doing very well in NXT, I think she is someone that's primed to also be a major part of the WWE going forward as well. But when it comes to the women's championships, there was Money in the Bank with Asuka versus Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania, and they blew it, and they blew it big time. So it's hard for me to get back into it, and I'm sorry, and I apologize for that.
It's crazy, because I agree with you, because let's think of it this way. Who won the Royal Rumble on the men's side? Shinsuke this year. Who won the women's Royal Rumble? Asuka. So the two highly touted Japanese wrestlers who were trying to make a mark for themselves, who are both way over, who have both won titles in NXT, both win the Rumble on the same night. Both of them lost their title opportunities at WrestleMania. Neither one of them. And that was shocking to me. I picked Shinsuke in every single AJ Styles match because I just wanted him to win so bad. I love him as a heel now, and I love that turn. That was my favorite part of WrestleMania. But I just want to see Shinsuke with the WWE title. He could do wonders with it if given the right material. And now transitioning to Asuka, I completely agree. And look what happened to her. She hasn't been on TV in weeks. And before that, she was feuding with James Ellsworth. They have ruined the mystique around Asuka, the aura around her. She had this 3-year undefeated streak that just, oh, by the way, clean lost to Charlotte at WrestleMania, like clean as a whistle. She went over. So I have no idea. They could have put her in the women's title match for SmackDown and made it a fatal 4-way. That would have been incredible. And I'm hyped as heck for the triple threat. Don't get me wrong. I think Carmella's taking that and retaining, but if you put Asuka in that match, that could be match of the night, and that includes the guys' matches. So they're really, really digging Asuka into a hole here. What we need to remember is Evolution's coming up in October, and Survivor Series is coming up, which usually has champion versus champion. I can kind of see Ronda winning the title off of Alexa Bliss, because then she has a big money match for Survivor Series. She's not just a part of a team, which I could see that too with like Natalia and all that. and she goes into Evolution, the first ever women's pay-per-view, with the strap. That's money. That's ratings. That's going to draw people into this pay-per-view. That's why I think she wins it, for no other reason than ratings and money.
Once again, it is Greg Hall from We Podcast and We Know Things. He's got an outstanding show you have to listen to each week on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 different outlets. You mentioned in our WWE SummerSlam preview about Natalya. A couple things I wanted to talk about before we head on out is, her father, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, recently passed away at 63, so early from complications and a stroke due to his Alzheimer's, which at 63 is just so hard for me to fathom that, having Alzheimer's at that early of an age is just, to me, it's really scary and it's really unfortunate. And my prayers and thoughts go to the entire Neidhart family. Your thoughts on Neidhart's contribution to professional wrestling? And obviously it starts and quite a big portion of it is continued with the Hart Foundation.
And the Hart Foundation was, for me growing up, I just turned 30 a couple months ago. So the era that the Hart Foundation really took off as a tag team and then a bigger staple when Owen and the Bulldog kind of came into that and they kind of made that stable. That was huge for me growing up. It was post Rockers. It was pre-DX. So it was that transitional stable that really made me glued to the set. And, Jim Neidhart's laugh, that super infectious, kind of almost heelish laugh that he had. And obviously the goatee, and they made Pink cool, first of all. And, he was like the first big guy. For a while in my life, I thought him and the Big Boss Man were the same guy. And I thought he was just switching costumes. But I have nothing but respect for Jim, what he did in the ring. I heard he was I've heard and seen he's a great person out of the ring as well. A humble soul who just wanted to make people happy and laugh, and a great father, Natalya, obviously coming from almost wrestling royalty. But again, thoughts and prayers with him. And he had an impact on me from a tag team wrestling perspective growing up, and have nothing but respect for him.
And his relationships with the famous Hart family, not only being married, remarried, and twice time married to one of the daughters of Stu Hart, and also being a big time member, one of the last major contributors to Calgary wrestling before it was bought out by the WWE, makes him, his status always there as far as professional wrestling. And of course, to everybody that knows him and knows his career and follows his career in any form or stature, knows his tenure as a WWE Tag Team Champion with Bret the Hitman Hart as part of the Hart Foundation. And they did a lot of things to not only make the tag team scene more visible, but they did a lot of things together that truly were very special. And again, our thoughts and prayers go to the Hart family, the Neidhart family, and everyone involved in regards to the passing of Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
They have the WWE Network, I think today, which is Wednesday the 15th, have released a collection on the WWE Network of all of Jim's best work. So if you've never really gotten a chance to see him, if you are a fan who came in the late 90s, early 2000s, maybe even after that, and you never really got to see him work, well, there's a collection now on the network for you with all of his best stuff. So I encourage you to watch that.
Absolutely. That's a great watch indeed. And for any big time fans or anyone that wanted to know and better understand the career of Jim the Anvil Neidhart, there's no better place to go to see that collection than the WWE Network. Definitely. That's a great suggestion indeed. Well, I also want to touch on another wrestling death. The unfortunate passing for Brian Christopher Lawler, better known to many in the late 90s when he was really doing well with the WWE as part of a member of Too Cool, Brian Christopher. Your thoughts with Brian Christopher, because of the fact that I wanted to ask you about this because I wrote an article sometime back about the 25th anniversary of the breakup of the Rockers, a team that you're very familiar with and you're very fond of, and how the careers of Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels seem to really go in opposite directions. One very good, one not so good. in the early days of his, or in the early years of his career, he actually had a chance to team up with a debuting wrestler at that point in time named Flex Cavana. And not everybody knows the name Flex Cavana out there at that point in time, but that debuting wrestler in some of his first matches, as far as from a pro wrestling standpoint, came to be known as Rocky Maivia, and then as someone we know as Dwayne The Rock Johnson. So seeing those two together, and I actually was looking back last week on YouTube to see Flex Cavana's actual debut as far as from an interview standpoint with Brian Christopher, and it got me thinking to see what the status of both was like, because both did go on to some early success in the late 90s in the WWE, but from there on in, it went south for one and it went north for another.
Yeah, Brian Christopher, after, when he got into the company, like you said, they kind of went two different places. And if you were to ask me in 1997, 96 area, who would have gone up and who would have gone down, I'd have said Christopher through the roof, and I would have said Dwayne down, because when Rocky Maivia made his debut, he came out with the tassels and the curly hair, and he was booed out of the arena. It wasn't until he became a heel with the Nation of Domination that he got the Rock persona, referred to himself in the third person, showed his excellent promo work, and that kind of boosted himself. Where Brian Christopher was kind of a one-trick pony. I was introduced to him during his feuds with Taka Michinoku, one of my favorite wrestlers from the 90s. I love Taka Michinoku. So I watched all of his matches. I'd go to West Coast Video and rent the latest pay-per-view, come home, pop it in the VCR, and enjoy over and over again. And I didn't realize he was Jerry the King Lawler's son until on a pay-per-view they actually said, "This is my son." And they became this father-son kind of heel team where Lawler would, no matter what, defend him on commentary. And it was really funny back and forth stuff. Then you come to find out that he turns into Grandmaster Sexay for Too Cool, and never was more over than with Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty, and they had the dance. And I was actually just watching Royal Rumble, it was either 98, 99, or 2000 with some friends a couple weeks ago, and Rikishi's cleaning house, and then Brian Christopher comes in, and then the next one is Scotty 2 Hotty, and all three of them are in the ring alone during a Royal Rumble, and the music hits, and they're doing the dance around, and Scotty 2 Hotty's doing the worm, and it was a great time. And then Rikishi ends up eliminating both of them and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, like, you got to do what you got to do." And from then on, you just don't really remember much. And unfortunately, his demons had taken hold of him after that, and he left the earth way too soon. But that's what I remember mostly about Brian Christopher, was his Taka Michinoku feud and his time as Grandmaster Sexay.
And like you said, his time before the WWE and after the WWE was pretty much based in and around the Memphis area. And as we both know, his father, Jerry the King Lawler, is a legend in the Memphis area. I mean, there's not someone that's down there that either they're like or dislike pro wrestling that isn't aware of how and I guess how prominent Jerry the King Lawler is within that society. Maybe there were some issues, with that, as far as being the son of somebody so famous in that area. Maybe there were other issues. Obviously, an arrest led to an issue where they found him in a police jail cell in an unfortunate condition and weren't able to revive him. So there's still investigations going on with that. But to see him in his sad state as far as what happened to his career, and to see where Dwayne The Rock Johnson has gone from that point in time when they were both together in that small, in that television studio in Memphis way back when in the mid 90s, it just makes you think how life can be for some people, and they make the right decisions, and some others when they don't. You mentioned, Rock's career taking off after originally being somewhat considered a failure upon his entry in the WWE, and not being loved or appreciated at all, even though he was supposed to be a quote unquote fan favorite, much like, I believe one of his relatives, Roman Reigns, today. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think it's his uncle or his cousin.
How ironic is that? I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So, but if there was, if I was asked Dwayne The Rock Johnson the question, getting on Dwayne for just a sec, I think the question I would probably ask, and if I was only allowed one, is how do you think your career would have gone out, been gone down? What kind of road would you have taken if you had not had made that famous Die Rocky Die promo? And if you don't know what I'm talking about out there, you just go to YouTube or the WWE Network, and look for his first promo as a member of the Nation of Domination, because that, and I'm sure you would agree with me, Greg, that's really where the path of The Rock really came into being.
Yeah, and it was his heel work that got him over, and then his face turn that continued it. The WWE, you know, almost booked him to perfection for 10 years plus. I mean, they knew exactly when to pull the trigger on a heel turn, on a face turn. He was given carte blanche over his promos later on in his career, where he could go out and say whatever he wanted. And he had a lot of comedy stuff going on, but it was those heel promos that he cut early in his career that put him on another pedestal, stratosphere, whatever you want to call it, to separate him not only from the other members of the Nation, because the only other vocal one was Farouk at the time, from the rest of the roster. And that's what put him and Stone Cold into that stratosphere for what, 5-6 years together as the two faces of the company. Perfect booking almost all around from the WWE. So kudos to Vince and Co. for what they did with The Rock. But yeah, Die Rocky Die was a hugely memorable one. And then as you kind of get on later, the This Is My Life segment that he did with Mankind is still one of, if not the highest rated segment of Raw of all time. So just anytime you look back on The Rock, it's either a WrestleMania match or it's a promo. That's what you kind of remember.
That you do. And I guess I'll just end with this. My thoughts on as far as how those two have deviated in their lives, unfortunately, with the sad ending for Brian Christopher's life. It goes to show you it's just how funny how life is, and how life can take turns, some for the best and some for the worst. And you see Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I mean, I'm talking about him. You're talking about him pretty much, at least once a month, if not more, when it comes to all the movies that he's doing. He's working on the Jungle Cruise live action movie right now at this point in time. So his life has gone into a whirlwind, when it was once after he finished playing in the CFL, and his life was taking a downward turn. He finally turned to professional wrestling. And although it didn't start off well, it really, like you said, it really has taken off from there, as opposed to Brian Christopher, who we thought at the time might be the more successful of the two, because it looked like he had charisma. He looks like he had style, athleticism, and looked like he had a lot going for him. But unfortunately, that didn't turn out to be the case. When you see instances like this, or with the Rockers, or some other team or some other duo that you've seen that have gone in such vast directions, what does that tell you about maybe the lifestyle, or the basically the life that is pro wrestling, and how it can just really just go so far in one direction and so far in another?
I think the biggest thing that tells you is never take it for granted any second. And that's why, you look at a guy today like Michael Bennett, or as he is on the roster, Mike Kanellis, who's married to Marie Kanellis. He is about a year sober now. He had a lot of demons that he was battling through personally. He was a huge star in the indies. WWE scooped him up about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, maybe a year and a half now, and used him in the beginning as this power of love duo. Then Maria got pregnant, and he kind of got taken off of television. But the greatest Royal Rumble that happened in Saudi Arabia a couple months ago, whenever that was, he got to come down. He was in it for about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and then got eliminated. And he got a bunch of crap on Twitter for it. And he tweeted out, and this has stuck with me. He was like, I got to be in a Royal Rumble event in Saudi Arabia. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter for how long. It's that I got to do it. So for somebody that enjoyed all this success on the indies, similar to a tag team, you enjoy all this tag team success, WWE can break up that tag team whenever they want. We saw with the Shield. Now those three guys went over, luckily, but that doesn't always happen that way. And a guy like Michael Bennett who says, I'm not going to let this, take this for granted. That has to be the mindset for a WWE or any professional athlete in general, but a WWE superstar with the travel schedule that they have, this, that, and the other. Think of a more recent example in WWE is Absolution. That comes to mind for me because Paige is arguably the most over female performer of the past century, or I'm sorry, the decade. And Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville are riding high. They're led by Paige, and all of a sudden she gets a neck injury at a house show and has to announce her retirement. And now Absolution's a mid-card at best, not comedy act, but they don't pick up any wins. They just lost the other night on SmackDown. So it's just crazy how quickly things can turn. So any advice out there is just, you never know when your last match is going to be. You never know when your next or last taste of success will be. So never, ever take it for granted.
Absolutely, that's correct. Sorry, just sound in the way there. Absolutely, that's correct. And once again, we've got Greg Hall again from We Podcast and We Know Things. Before we head on out, my friend, you got to tell me and tell everyone out there why they need to listen to your awesome show, which you can find right now on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 different outlets. Why they need to listen to your show, We Podcast and We Know Things.
Thank you very much, by the way. We just hit our 2-year anniversary on July 31st of this year. So we're almost not an infant anymore. We're in our terrible twos, and we're trying to make them the terrific twos. We just crossed episode 100, so we're about to record episode 104 this weekend with our SummerSlam predictions and preview. And also we've done 29. I counted them right before we came on the air. Did 29 what we call bonus episodes, whether that be interviews with musicians, TV hosts, actors, directors, whoever we want to book or are kind enough to come on the show. We have excellent interviews. We've done live episodes where we've had crowds come out to support the show from wineries and breweries. We've had stand-up comedians on the show. In fact, recently, one of my most fond interviews that I've ever done, one of the most fun 2 hours of our lives, was we had Phil Moore on the show recently, who was the host of Nick Arcade back in the early 90s on Nickelodeon. And he's doing some other stuff now for Nickelodeon as well. He's a producer now. He says he's getting the itch to come back to being a host. But if you want some good comedy, that interview, we were in stitches the entire time. He was lucky enough. He sang us the Nick Arcade theme song, but put our names and our podcast in there, and we have it recorded. So it's really a special thing that we get to talk about movies and music and TV and games and wrestling, but we also get to talk about whatever we want. We talk about the blockbuster, the last blockbuster that's around. They're making a movie about that, and we're probably going to have the filmmaker on the show to talk about that. We had one of the actors from The Room, one of my favorite movies, but highly regarded as one of the worst movies of all time. We had Robin Paris from the movie on our show to do an interview. So just we can have guests from all walks of life, all breadths. And we encourage you to check it out. We had, like I said, our 2-year anniversary recently, and we're looking to never stop. We upload every single Saturday, like you said, on Podbean, Stitcher, Castbox, iTunes, Apple Podcast, everywhere under the planet, Spotify, iHeart. So we really take pride in our content. We have a lot of fun doing it. We record at 7 in the morning on Saturday, so we're wide awake. It's a really good time. So we appreciate anybody who comes and listens to us. Matter of fact, I'll spill some inside baseball. We are approaching 30,000 listeners, and we had our biggest day ever the week after I came on this show last time.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm hoping that continues for you, and it'll even get bigger from there, because I'll tell you what, it's just so awesome to have another show that deals with pop culture in the way you guys do. And I've listened to the show before. It's a great listen. And I'm going to listen to that show with Phil Moore, just because, Nick, Nickelodeon. Okay, yeah. Sorry. I just, vacated half our audience there. But
every anyway, 90s person remembers that jingle.
Yes, exactly. As long as Ren and Stimpy comes right after it. But we won't go there.
No, but Ren and Stimpy, kind of overrated. I'll go there. I'll go there. Couple good episodes. Love the wrestling episode. Love the
Mad
haunted
Dog
house
Hogue
episode.
and Killer Cadugan. You
Yeah.
cannot. No, that is
Good
the
for you.
best. That's the best Nickelodeon has ever done. Sorry.
Oh wow. Hey, listen. I think it's just a little overrated. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but give me original Doug. Give me I was a skateboarder, so give me Rocket Power. Give me the Rugrats, even though they're doing a 27 episode revival of the Rugrats coming up. Give me Nick Arcade and Double Dare and Legends of the Hidden Temple and Guts. Oh man, all that above Ren and Stimpy, but it's a good show. It's a great show. Don't get me wrong.
I've sunken in my chair about 10 inches here while you said that.
I guess I'm never allowed back on the show.
No, actually, no. You know what? If Josh was on the show right now, he probably would agree with you.
Okay.
So that's okay. That's okay. Everyone is just entitled to their own opinions, especially on all the Nickelodeon shows. Although, Stimpy. But we won't go there. Once again, it is Greg Hall from We Podcast and We Know Things. You got to check it out. Again, it's on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 different outlets. Greg, it's been great talking pro wrestling with you today and Nickelodeon as well. I cannot wait to have you back on the show, and continued success to you, your co-host, and your program as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Everybody enjoy SummerSlam. We really appreciate it if you check us out. And thanks again for having me on the show. It was a pleasure and an honor.
I appreciate it as always. And it's always great to have you a part.
Thanks.
Of the pop culture cosmos.